this specific type of injury is working out with an inflamed biceps tendon. Now, your biceps tendon is essentially right here near your elbow, and it's also, there's another one that's up here near your shoulder. So your biceps attaches at your shoulder and at your elbow. So that's the first thing I wanted to start off with, is that's where it is. But what we really want to know is what exercises will affect the biceps tendon and how should we work around those so you don't cause it any more injury, you don't cause it any more harm, and hopefully you can get back to a point where you are doing exercises that do directly target and work the biceps tendon, because you don't want to just completely get rid of them, because you're going to get very weak and potentially lose all your strength for that. So we want to get to a point where you can get back up to par, right? So as I just discussed, the biceps tendon can attach at the elbow and the shoulder. So it would make sense that any movement that involves the shoulder and elbow joint, for the most part, and we'll discuss this in a second, for the most part, will target that biceps tendon. So if you have an inflamed biceps tendon, or if you just have some kind of like a nagging overuse injury in that area, just realize that those specific movements are going to work and stress that directly. When I say stress, stress isn't necessarily a bad thing. Stress is just going to be applied to the load. You might have overstressed it to a point where it does need to rest and kind of cut back on the volume and overall intensity of the exercise, but stress isn't inherently bad. So the movement specifically that would likely cause some issues is elbow flexion movements. So elbow flexion is essentially anytime you're taking your elbow from a straight position and bending it in. That movement directly is from your biceps muscle, which the biceps tendon that attaches muscle to bone, that's getting used in that movement. So an example of exercises that involve this are any type of biceps curl, and it doesn't have to be a simple biceps curl. It can be like an alternating curl, it can be a reverse curl, it can be a neutral grip curl. You know, all of these to some degree are going to target elbow flexion, okay? In addition to that, any type of rowing movement, so a movement where you have, say, a dumbbell or any object in front of you, and you are pulling it towards your chest, that is also going to work your biceps tendon because it's working elbow flexion to some degree. Pull-ups or pull-downs, lat pull-downs or pull-ups, same concept. You are starting your arm in a straight position and you are coming down, which is going to ultimately flex your elbow and work the biceps tendon in that exact area, right? In addition to this, the biceps tendon can actually help with shoulder flexion as well. So it's bringing your shoulder up higher, up in front of you. So some of the movements that are targeted with shoulder flexion could be a front raise. So that's just lifting a weight up in front of you. Bench press will do this, push-ups of course, and even overhead press to some degree, either with dumbbells or a barbell, doesn't particularly matter. All of these are going to work your biceps tendon. So what we want to do is limit these movements if our doctor is prescribing us to kind of take it easy for a little bit of this. So, you know, when I say limit, there's a few different ways that we can kind of limit this. Some may tell you to do nothing, like completely cut off the exercises. I go from a more motion is lotion aspect of this, where doing a little bit of movement without pain in the area just to continue to get blood flow and nutrients to those areas, to continue to keep the muscle as strong as possible, to keep the tendon as strong as possible while still giving it time to rest. That's kind of what I normally do. So, you know, consult with your doctor, whoever it is, but there's a reason why people do PT. It's because literally not doing any type of physical activity is just going to usually make the pain worse. So doing some very low dosed physical activity where you're doing lots of repetitions and fairly low volume for the most part, compared to what you would do in the gym, and low intensity, that's usually what gets people back up to par. So this can mean using very, very, very extremely light loads. Sometimes it might not even be a load at all. Maybe it's when you're doing an overhead press, you're just doing an overhead press with your arm, okay? Is that painful? Great. Stick with that for a little bit. A slow tempo, so controlling the movement, feeling that muscle and the tendon work through the entire range of motion. It's a great way to do it. And then over time, ideally, you're going to be able to ease back into those heavier movements. And when I say ease back, I mean ease back. Ease back into this, because the last thing you want to do is to tweak it again, make it worse. Remember that fitness and health and all these things are largely derived benefits from doing it for a long period of time. So you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot if you jump back in super quickly after you had an injury. Just remember that, you can still train legs and abs heavy. You can still do harder exercises. You can still get on a bike and pedal as hard as you can and get some good cardiovascular exercise. You just need to be careful when doing it with the arms are involved. So we can think about like a goblet squat, for example. A goblet squat is a leg exercise. You're holding that dumbbell or kettlebell in front of you and then just doing squats. But this does target your biceps a little bit. It is targeting elbow flexion a tiny bit. So that might not be the best option for you. Instead, doing maybe like a leg press, or you might even be able to get away with a back squat if you're not putting too much pressure on your arms, right? But ultimately, trying to limit the arm movements, specifically shoulder flexion and elbow flexion, as much as you can is going to be the best case scenario for you. Try to do them and then ease back into them over time. Go ahead and drop a like if that section gave you some value and provided you some knowledge, and go ahead and comment down below too if you have any questions on this. I know it can be kind of confusing when you're trying to find out what to do when you're working out and whatnot, so drop those down below. I will definitely get to them